I might do.
I don't think we have.
We have not. If you want to, go for it. But I could do it today too. But I was going to do.
No, if you want it, have at it.
Okay, I'll do it today. I had meant to do that, but just hadn't done it. So,
all good.
Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast. I'm Ben McKee, and I'm joined by Ryan Callahan and Patrick Brown on a Sunday edition of the podcast, an August 17th edition of the podcast. Tennessee was back practicing this morning following its scrimmage on Friday. Of course, we, the media, were not there because we are no longer allowed to see any practice. I suppose the next time we see practice is possibly during bowl season. If not during bowl season, then it will be spring practice, but we have plenty to discuss in the meantime as Tennessee gets ready for its mock game week. We sit here 13 days away from it being football time in Tennessee. Edwin Spillman days away. That's the first 13 that comes to my mind. I'm sure there's, or Sharon Jones. How about that one for you? I'm sure I'm leaving out an obvious number.
Did Chris Hannon wear 13 back in the day?
He did. Yep.
Is there another obvious 13 we're forgetting about? I don't feel like 13's really been worn a ton.
More of a defensive back number, and historically, it seems like been some corners that have worn that one.
Malik Foreman wore 13 at one point.
Terry Fair wore 13.
Terry Fair, that's a good one.
That is a good one. I feel like didn't Malik Foreman wear 13 like his last year? He switched, or
I think that's right.
That sounds right, but maybe it's not right. But the greatest day on the countdown is Eric Berry days away, and that was yesterday on Saturday. Aside from the simple being one day away from having football, what is your favorite number on the jersey countdown till it's football time in Tennessee? Eric Berry was my favorite player growing up, so it's in 14. I consider my favorite number, my lucky number. So 14 is the easy choice for me.
Seven's a good one.
Seven's a good one.
It's game week or pretty much game week. Gerard Mayo. There've been some good ones.
Clausen.
Zero to me. Let's just. I want it to be game day. Let's go.
I hear you. I guess soon we'll have actual zeros that count on the countdown. Ethan Davis. Am I forgetting anybody else?
William Wright wears number 0 now, so put some respect on his name.
I knew I was forgetting somebody. That's why I set you up to answer.
Danico Slaughter, but he doesn't get to be in the countdown since he left, right?
And that's a good question for the is he a VFL club?
VFL family is going to be huge with all these transfers in and out.
Yep, no doubt. I would consider Danico Slaughter a VFL because he got his degree from Tennessee. Yeah. So I would consider him one for sure. But we'll move on from the countdown and talk about the number of other things we need to discuss, which the purpose of this podcast is to react to that second scrimmage and final scrimmage of fall camp that Tennessee held on Friday morning at Neyland Stadium. But we're going to talk about that during the second segment because somehow there has been news this fall camp that has upended that news, and that is that Tennessee has agreed to a new apparel deal with Adidas, a 10-year deal that will begin next July. So this is the last year Tennessee will be in Nike. The Adidas deal begins July 1st, 2026, and the writing is pretty well on the wall as to why this decision was made. Nike did not value Tennessee the way Adidas valued Tennessee, and neither side's going to release exact numbers, Patrick, but we believe it's going to be a top 3 apparel deal in all of college athletics, and that really tells you all you need to athletics.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of a, a lot of people they look at Adidas and think about what happened, the end of the deal over 10 years ago. But I mean, so much has changed since then. And I think Adidas is different now. I think obviously Tennessee's situation is different now. They are much more competitive across multiple sports and making a ton more revenue. I think I don't want to butcher the numbers, but I mean, Danny White said it just in like his own tenure alone, they've like almost doubled their revenue on a yearly basis. So, and certainly revenue is a big factor in this era of college sports, which has changed a lot too with NIL and now revenue sharing. So, and to stay competitive, you're going to have to spend. So if you can get a much better apparel deal. And now there will be figures that have been tossed out. Obviously, I think 200 million has been the one that's mentioned. That's not going to be, I think, just to quote Randy Moss, straight cash, homie. That's going to be cash, gear, other things that could be included in sort of the total value of these apparel deals. That's sort of how they're worked. And as Ben mentioned, I doubt we'll get the full details of the full contract and all that to know what is what. But yeah, I mean, I think it was Tennessee went to the market in a stronger position than maybe it was 10 years ago or in 2014 when they switched to Nike, and certainly with different leadership. I think Dave Hart was looking to move to Nike no matter what. And obviously I think Danny White was looking for the most lucrative deal, which is why it was apparent for a while that, with what was being discussed with Adidas, that they were going to make that switch. And that the term you hear a lot is that Tennessee's going to be one of the flagships, if not the flagship for Adidas. And I think that was obviously very appealing. And if you're Tennessee, you're like, yeah, we should have, we should be valued a certain way and valued highly. So I think it's been, as you wrote it in a column that was really well done, I think it was a no-brainer when you laid out all the facts. And I know that people will look at the mismatched orange, and those gray jerseys that never saw the light of day except for the retail store. And then what was it, that youth team over in somewhere other part of the world, wherever it was, with the checkerboard on the shoulder pads. I think, people will think of that and think that the jersey is just going to go to crap. I don't think it's going to be the case. Tennessee will still have design control as they have had under Nike, and they've got a lot of talented people over there. You've seen their work on Tennessee's teams over the past few years. So I think those are reasons for, as a fan, you might not like Adidas. I know I personally hadn't bought anything Adidas for a long time. But from Tennessee's standpoint, from a business standpoint, and I haven't even mentioned the NIL angle, that's obviously going to be a big part of it too, Ryan. I think it was a pretty easy call for Tennessee to make this switch.
You're muted.
I was muted. Yeah, I think that it's definitely a no-brainer, especially in this landscape, to see that you can make this much more money that helps pay the bills. That's the biggest aspect of this. And then I think that when you throw in the potential recruiting component, the benefits of this, where Adidas, at least the plan is for them to be pretty aggressive in seeking out NIL deals with current Tennessee players and with prospects in some cases. I mean, this is something that legitimately could help Tennessee in a very tangible way. Whereas, any benefit to staying with Nike would have probably been less tangible, because you weren't going to have those kinds of things with Nike, almost definitely. And you would have just been hoping that you would have been getting some credibility with a lot of prospects by having an apparel company that they like. So there's almost no reason to stick with Nike, and there's all the incentive in the world to make the switch. And to your point, Patrick, I've spoken with some people who've been involved with teams and are currently on teams that wear Adidas gear, and they say it's a lot better than it was 10, 15 years ago. The Adidas has made some real strides in that area. So I don't think you're looking at, and again, the creative control aspect negates any concerns you might have about, is Adidas going to design some crap that we're not going to like and it's not going to look good on the field. Tennessee can veto anything like that. Even if Adidas does have some ideas, they don't have to go along with them. So I just see lots of upside for this. It's obviously a very lucrative deal. It's been reported nearly $20 million a year. That's, probably combining, like you were saying, Patrick, a lot of different things. And it's not going to be a, clean. It's hard to value these deals in some ways because of all the different components of it. But the bottom line is it's a lot more money. I received a text message from someone around the time Adidas was making its pitch to Tennessee in person, and Tennessee representatives went to Adidas headquarters, and there's an outdoor field of some sort, field turf type deal. And they had painted the ends of it in a checkerboard pattern and made the thing look like a little football field. And so they had clearly gone all out for Tennessee. And once I heard that, I was like, this thing's done. Adidas is going to win this, because we knew Nike was not going to put up this kind of fight. They think that everyone should just kind of flock to Nike and that they shouldn't have to pay these kinds of amounts to get a school. So you could your choices are basically be one of 15 really good programs that has the Nike logo, and you're not even Jordan Brand, which obviously carries a lot of weight in some people's eyes. You're not that. Or you can be Adidas and have all these things thrown your way that can make your program better in multiple ways. So I think it was a no-brainer.
And I don't even know that Tennessee would have been top 15 for Nike. Yeah. I mean, we could sit here and argue that Nike would have excluded Tennessee from its top 15, which is more reason that Tennessee signed with Adidas. And to Patrick's point about the flagship aspect of it, I was told from people at Tennessee that Adidas has never referred to anybody else as a flagship program. So with how Nike treats Oregon, and I know that's a little bit different because of the Phil Knight relationship and component there, but to that extent, or Under Armour and whoever it prides itself on, what is it, Notre Dame? I believe that Notre Dame's really in bed with. I mean, Tennessee is going to be treated by Adidas as if they are Notre Dame or Oregon with their respective brands, and it just wasn't going to be that way with Nike. And Ryan, it's really confusing to me as to why Nike did not prioritize Tennessee. To a certain extent, I get it. I think they have, in regards to a college athletic department and investing in them, they have so many hands and so many different cookie jars. When you look at how many schools are Nike, when you look at their involvement with the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball,
MLB now, yeah.
There's so many different things that, okay, it's like to Nike, I see why Tennessee is kind of nothing to them because they already have so much on their plate. It's not going to make or break their bottom line is what I'm getting at. But what's confusing to me is that Nike emphasizes merchandise sales, TV ratings, venues being sold out, and those three categories, Tennessee is at the top or right at the top of all of those. And to not value Tennessee from that perspective and be willing to sign in Auburn rather than a Tennessee. And there's rumors out there that Tim Cook, the Apple CEO, I know he's not part of Nike like a Phil Knight is, but I would imagine there's a relationship there with Phil Knight, and that it sounds like that's maybe why the Auburn deal eventually got done, is because of the Tim Cook aspect of it. But I mean, in what world are we, favoring Auburn? And not to discredit Auburn's brand, it's one of the bigger ones in the SEC, but they're not putting up the numbers in merchandise sales and TV ratings and selling out venues the way that Tennessee is. So from that standpoint, to me, that's why it's confusing as to why Nike was not interested in renegotiating.
Yeah, it's hard to say how Nike views the return on investment or potential return on investment for a deal like this. And that's where, I think it's definitely worth pointing out they've got different priorities. They do have some schools where they have more lucrative deals, but I saw or I heard some people referencing that even Kentucky, has a pretty good deal with Nike, and they probably sell a lot of gear because of Kentucky basketball. I don't know, but there's UCLA and some of these other programs that they've had lucrative deals. So Tennessee absolutely should command a lucrative deal with whoever it goes with. And let's face it, in this era, you've got to be looking for competitive advantages. Tennessee just gave itself a competitive advantage if this deal goes as planned. Staying with Nike would in no way have given Tennessee a competitive advantage. Again, you would have just been one of a number of Nike schools, and it wouldn't have been at the same dollar value. So even if you're thinking, okay, maybe just throw away a few $1 million. How much money do you need at the end of the day? Just take a slightly lesser deal and stay Nike because kids like Nike. I mean, that doesn't give you a competitive.
Kids like money.
Yeah, kids like money, and that's going to be a real thing. If that goes as planned, you're going to have a lot more players at Tennessee being endorsed with Adidas while they're in college, and even potentially in the recruiting process. And that's a big deal. That's something you can actually benefit from on the field. It's debatable whether anyone these days is choosing a school because they have certain brand uniforms or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it's some people have kind of mentioned this as like I don't want to say one of a first of its kind of deal, and that's why I wish we could see more of the contract language to see what exactly how much of the supposed value is going to what things, because I mean, it's sort of a way, Tennessee and Adidas were not hesitant to throw out that, hey, this is going to help NIL, and that is going to be a certainly with revenue sharing, NIL is going to be sort of used as an over the top, right? Like everybody's going to have up to a certain amount of money to share with however many teams. Some schools are going to distribute it differently, but a way to still, fork out a lot of money for top talent and to keep top talent is sort of that NIL in addition to it on top of the revenue share. And so this Adidas deal already having ramifications where Adidas can go into NIL deals with Tennessee athletes. And as Ryan mentioned, prospects too. That's big. There's the NIL, there's the Adidas like ambassador network too. I don't want to mistake the things, but it's almost like you're an Adidas athlete. I guess you would promote their products on social media and things like that. And that's another way to pay athletes. And that's what it's going to come down to. I mean, I remember Danny White talking at the Big Orange Caravan. I think it was in Kingsport. It was around the same time that it was reported that, I think it was Texas, that their football roster this year was going to cost like 35 to 40 million. That is including the proposed revenue share. Of course, House hadn't been settled yet. And so you're thinking it was going to be whatever the revenue share split was plus NIL on top of it. And there's been figures too about what Texas Tech is spending. And some of those figures are probably a little bloated. And some of them are probably front loaded because a lot of schools, a lot of football teams sort of got those things done before House came in, before those NIL deals were scrutinized. But you're going to have, you're not going to get by just on the revenue distribution. And I think, for what Tennessee wants to do and as competitive as Tennessee wants to be. And Danny White said, I asked him about that report and he said, we're as competitive as anybody. And whatever the rules are, whether it is rev share, whether it is NIL, whether it's a combination of the two, he expected Tennessee to be strong in both. And I think this deal will keep Tennessee strong with in both of those factors because it'll boost your revenue in terms of how much cash you're probably getting. And then there's also the NIL angle of this deal as well. That's going to help Tennessee bring in top players and keep them as well.
And on the flip side of that, Patrick, I think it's absolutely fair for fans to increase expectations as well, because I will at least speak for myself, and Patrick, you already alluded to it, but there are other brands that in our personal life we would prefer to wear over Adidas, that they are not making this move because Adidas is the hot brand or it's very popular in terms of the logo. It is, I think, more established than Tennessee. Some Tennessee fans want to give them credit for. It's not a nothing brand. It's not Reebok or I don't know.
Is it Nate Ament? Isn't he a Reebok guy?
Yes, he
hanging
is
out with gorillas, right?
Yeah,
that's right. Slandering some companies today.
Well, I'm not slandering, but it just more proven Adidas is that this isn't Tennessee trying to put Mike Matthews in old Allen Iverson type cleats or Shaquille Nate Ament in Shaquille O'Neal basketball shoes when he steps foot on campus. I mean, Adidas is a legitimate brand, and so is Reebok, but Adidas even more so.
As I was telling someone earlier, again, looking at it from the standpoint of a competitive advantage, I'd rather be the number one Converse school than one of 15 or 20 Nike schools or ASICs or what. Throw out whoever you want. But yes. I just don't see a lot of benefit to being just one of a bunch of schools.
No,
that's Nike.
And neither did Tennessee. But to that point, like if you're going to make this deal, which totally makes sense, it was a no-brainer. You had to do it, in my opinion. But if you are going to go to the less popular brand for the sake of theoretically having more resources, which will theoretically allow you to win more, you better start winning more, both on the recruiting trail and on the football field, on the basketball court, and so on and so forth. So fans are absolutely correct in thinking, and remember, this is on top of the imposed talent fee and all sorts of other things that Tennessee has
where I was going
to theoretically have more resources to win. So fans are absolutely right to raise expectations going forward.
See, all fans have been hearing for a while is how much more money the program is bringing in with Danny White running the athletic department. And he's done a great job of raising money and getting facilities upgrades done. And they're selling sponsorships on the field. They're putting in more premium seating to things all the time. They're selling the sponsorship rights to Thompson Bowling Arena, all these things they weren't doing before. And so all they hear is Tennessee's got more money now. And I think you're right. That's going to come with higher expectations. Fair or not, in this case, I think it's totally fair because it's the Adidas deal should help them.
Yeah, and as you spend more, you are expected to win more. And I do think, though, it's like okay, how much more, where is this money going? There's some of that stuff is obviously not disclosed. So that makes it tough, because fans want to know, okay, we signed this. What was the pilot deal? Do y'all remember? I mean, whatever it is, you want to know how much of it is going to what. And you look at some schools, even the revenue distribution. It's like some schools has come out and said, hey, we're going to, 75% of it's going to football. Some schools have done that. Tennessee has not said a word about that. They're not going to disclose this Adidas deal. For and some people have asked if it was, can it be records requested? I think there's ways around it that even other schools haven't really had to release that, those details. So
I think Tennessee had some state action done that prevents them from revealing all of that.
Right. So there's that. And so that, we don't know all the ins and outs of how Tennessee is, how they're distributing this money. If there's, if it's all going to football, if they're distributing it, if they're giving more to, one sport instead of the other. So there is that sort of secrecy, maybe a shroud of uncertainty. So that maybe adds to fans because they just see the big dollar signs and say, hey, that, we should be winning at that dollar sign kind of level. And you better be recruiting at that dollar sign kind of level as well.
And to emphasize some of the concerns that we brought up in passing during this first segment, I think the two big concerns from fans is recruits not wanting to pick Tennessee because it's Adidas. I don't see that happening whatsoever. Ryan and I have talked about it in the past on recruiting podcasts. Like, okay, then why is Miami and Texas A&M towards the top of the recruiting rankings every single season? Why did Tristan Key sign with Adidas? And we could go on and on and on. You're just not going to see that. They don't. Yes, technically they care about the brand, but when as much money is involved as they are getting paid to wear this brand or another, Nate Ament does not care if it's Reebok. Tristan Keys does not care if it's Adidas. Cam Ward does not care if it's Adidas, and so on and so forth. So I think that
he signed with Under Armour too, right? Didn't he sign? Wasn't he signed with Adidas at Miami and then with the Titans, or before the draft he signed? Ryan,
yeah, you can cross. That's one aspect of this. I mean, players absolutely can and have already kind of cross promoted. They've had different brands shoe deals while they're at a school that's wearing another brand's uniform. So even that doesn't limit you.
Yeah, I think Zakai Ziegler had signed some sort of deal with Adidas during the NCAA tournament. Obviously, when Tennessee was a Nike school. So yeah.
Yep. But yeah, I think this is. I mean, to Ben, to your point, I just think that's an old school way of thinking about it. I think that falls in the same category as facilities winning recruiting battles. That's just not. That's not a thing anymore. No one wins a recruiting battle anymore because School A had better facilities than School B.
Look at Tennessee baseball.
Yeah, I mean, you just have so many other things that are more directly impacting players, most notably money, that can go a long way. And then, and even beyond that, like players, if they think I can get to the NFL at this place, and I'm not sure about the other, you're going to go to the school that you think can get you to the NFL. So there's still so many more things that go into a recruiting battle than that. I mean, sure, there are some kids that really value that kind of stuff, but is it going to cost Tennessee in a noticeable way in recruiting? Absolutely not. And I've already spoken with multiple prospects who admitted they're not Adidas people, but they don't care. That's not the end of the day. Not the biggest deal for them at the end of the day. It's all about where they're going to have the best opportunities for NIL, where they're going to have the best opportunities on the field, where they're going to have the best opportunities to get to the professional league in whatever sport they're playing.
And I would not be concerned about the uniforms either. You both spoke about it earlier, but Tennessee is going to have total creative control. There's going to be better leadership in the room to make decisions with uniforms on both sides. Adidas is going to put a better foot forward this time around, and Tennessee also is going to have better leadership than it did kind of during those Derek Dooley days. And at the end of the day, like I have enjoyed the alternate uniforms. I hope we continue to see all black uniforms, the dark mode. I like the smoky gray uniforms. I feel like I'm on a bit of an island. I actually kind of like this year's alternate uniforms. Is it Tennessee? No, but it's an alternate uniform. It's not supposed to.
The different ideas are cool. I think the one last year with the state flag, I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, I agree, and I like alternate uniforms. My big thing is don't wear them in rivalry games or don't wear them on senior day when those seniors are taking photos in smoky gray uniforms. The last time they ever run through the T in Neyland Stadium. But with that being said, even though I am pro alternate uniform and hope that Tennessee sticks with one or two a year, certainly at least one with the dark mode, Tennessee's not Oregon. Tennessee is Tennessee orange and at home and white on the road. Go back to the very basic mid-90s, late 90s, mid to early 2000s, where it was just a very simple big block numbers with black outline numbers, and it had the right, just get the right shade of orange correct and keep it very simple. Swap out the Nike logo for the Adidas logo, and that's all you need. And I think that's all Tennessee is going to do.
Yeah. And to your point, Ben, there have been academic buildings, I believe, on campus that have started to incorporate that number font that Nike helped Tennessee start several years ago. I don't know that that's going away with this deal. I'll be fascinated to see if that changes, but there's a real reason to think they might not even change that, even though it originated with Nike. So, I don't think there are going to be significant changes on this. And yeah, I think fans have embraced the alternate jersey. There are always some that push back on the alternate uniforms, but look at how many fans wear black to the dark mode game every year. I mean, a lot of fans have embraced this and really get into it, enjoy buying the alternate jerseys with the gray every year. So it's, I don't think that part's going away, but I also don't think, to your point, they're gonna make sure they get the basics right. And I think fans should feel, I think, confident in most things they do, as long as Danny White is the athletic director, because he has shown things are going to be done at a high level under his watch. So I think you can have a good amount of confidence that they have creative control and all those things. If something doesn't look up to their standard, they're not going to wear it. I truly believe that.
Yeah, you saw that with baseball this year. Some of the new alternate uniforms that Nike produced were awful. And Tony and Danny, I believe the administration was like, nope, not wearing them.
Yep.
The number font, I wonder if maybe that's a proprietary thing for Tennessee and not Nike, so that they could keep it. But we'll just have to see. My only jersey request is to never, ever, ever again wear the orange helmet.
I'm with you on that. Actually, I didn't think it looked good.
It should be in the river next to Williams-Brice Stadium.
Forget what happened when they wore it. I know for some fans, they want to at least get that smell of them off if they wear them again. Wear them against ETSU or something so you can get a win in them. But I forget the outcome. I didn't think they looked good because they didn't match. It's hard to get that material to match, with the jerseys and fabric versus helmets.
All of it, all of the reasons, just no.
But on the flip side of that, who cares what they are wearing as long as they are winning? How many Tennessee fans would sign up for a 15-0 national championship season right now if it meant wearing those orange helmets in every single game?
I'm glad you said that, Ben, because I was just making the point earlier that fans are almost nostalgic. I've heard people talk about it fondly, about the old uniforms they wore in the 90s where they had the font that stretched all the way across the jersey for like a 4-letter last name. They looked awful. But fans loved them because they were winning in that era. So if they are winning, it won't matter what the uniforms look like. But I still think they're going to look good most of the time, even with Adidas. And I don't think much is going to change in that regard. But yeah, I think that's the best point of all. Fans are nostalgic for uniforms they wore when they won, and they absolutely hate the uniforms that they wore when they didn't win, like 2002. I've heard people complain about those wide stripes down the pants they wore in 2002. Partly because that was an 8-4 season. That team fell on its face after having a top 5 preseason ranking. So it's all about the outcome, honestly, at the end of the day.
It does make that team easy to remember because you're like, what game is that from? You see the big stripe down the side. And you're like, oh yeah, that season.
Yep.
When Fulmer didn't want them to wear black accessories, black socks or something like that because they wore them one time and they lost, and he was like, nope, never again.
And they did one particular person's favorite, wearing black cleats and white socks all the time. But yeah, they didn't wear black accessories.
On that note, it is time to transition to our second segment where we are going to discuss Tennessee's second scrimmage of fall camp. On the other side of this quick timeout here on the GoVols247 Podcast. Welcome back into the GoVols247 Podcast. I am Ben McKee, and I'm joined by Ryan Callahan and Patrick Brown on this Sunday, August 17th edition of the podcast. And before we continue our conversation and get into some fall scrimmage intel and takeaways, I do need to encourage you, wherever you find our GoVols247 podcast, whether that's on Apple, whether that's on Spotify or elsewhere, if you wouldn't mind going in and leaving us a review, setting up the notifications so you know when the pod is dropping and you can listen to it right away. And if you wouldn't mind sharing it as well, help us spread the GoVols247 podcast around as we get into football season, that's how you can help us in a major way, and we would greatly appreciate that. Ryan, how would you summarize what took place in Friday morning scrimmage at Neyland Stadium? We'll get to kind of our biggest takeaways, but what do you feel like the fans absolutely needs to know what took place on Friday morning?
It sounded like they got everybody out there who could possibly scrimmage that was available, and there were a few guys out with still some nagging things. Braylon Staley still didn't go. Chris Brazzell still didn't go, even though he's been out there a little bit. Still no Jermod McCoy, of course. But for the most part, they got everyone out there who could be out there, and got them at least some work. Even some guys who were sick that I initially heard were out actually got out there for a series or two, it sounds like. So it was an attempt to see kind of where things are for at least a minute with your roster. And then it was mostly, it seemed to be, I think they've kind of started to settle in on a depth chart, and that started at the quarterback position, where I think Joey Aguilar got the lion's share of the reps, at least with the first team offense. I'm not sure that he got all of them, but I haven't been told that he didn't get all of them. I was just told that Aguilar was the first one out there, and it was very clear to everyone in attendance that Aguilar is the starting quarterback, or is going to be the starting quarterback. So I know Josh Heupel has no intention of announcing that anytime soon. I've been pretty consistent saying I don't think it'll be until game week at the very earliest that we will hear the starting quarterback named, and it might even be the sorry, I had my phone connected to my computer here, but I think it'll be at least game week, and potentially even the night before the game, before we hear a starter name. There's no track record of anything different, so I don't think, even though it's the worst kept secret in the world, I don't think we're going to hear it from Josh Heupel. It's just how he operates. If there's any competitive advantage to be gained from not announcing it, he's not going to announce it. So if Syracuse has to watch even 30 minutes of Jake Merklinger film, that's a win in his mind. I don't think he's going to announce it.
Is there 30 minutes of Jake Merklinger film they can watch?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, high school film and whatever else you can watch on Jake Merklinger.
They're going to watch the spring game?
Yeah. I mean, you got to do what you can.
It wasn't on TV, though.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be watching that Zapruder film stuff, film from the stands.
They're going to go back and listen to the Vol Network broadcast to scout Jake Merklinger.
But yeah, I that's just how Josh Heupel operates. So they won't be announcing it anytime soon. But I think everyone can go ahead and pencil in number 6 as your starting quarterback, and the scrimmage only underscored that. And then you know what? There were some good things on both sides. A better day for the offense was the general takeaway. It wasn't a perfect day. I don't think it was just because the offense lit it up more. I think there were some defensive miscues that maybe led to some of the plays. But bottom line, you at least saw some better things from the passing game. Mike Matthews with a big play. They got him inside the 5 before the defense kind of bowed its neck and got a stop inside in the red zone. So some good things to build on at least. But it still feels like to me, from an offensive and passing game standpoint, that Tennessee is putting a lot on these next 2 weeks, trying to get everybody out there and up to speed. I think there's optimism that Braylon Staley will be back out there this coming week at some point, that Chris Brazzell is going to get more fully involved here pretty soon. And there's concern for me on my end about continuity and just how the passing games looked. It's concerning to me that we're this far into camp and we've heard a lot that says Joey Aguilar is the starter, but we've not heard a lot that, hey, Joey Aguilar looks really good. And that's maybe not ideal, but he's also not had his number 1 receivers out there to throw to. So get the starters out there, and I think that's the goal for this week. See what they look like when they get everybody out there and start building some chemistry. But it seems like Tennessee's hanging a lot of hopes on how much they can get done in these next 2 weeks getting ready for the opener, because right now I don't think they have a ton of continuity in the passing game to build on.
Yeah, Patrick, I don't think there's any doubt that Joey Aguilar or the quarterback competition is the biggest takeaway, which it would have been given the nature of the situation and the position. It's the most important position in all of sports, and the writing is on the wall, as it has been, that Joey Aguilar is going to be the starting quarterback. What are your thoughts on Ryan's thoughts about Josh Heupel waiting until very, very late in the process to announce a starting quarterback? I think it's so written on the wall that I would actually kind of be surprised if it's Tuesday of Syracuse week and they have not announced that Joey Aguilar is the starting quarterback publicly.
I mean, I suppose there's a chance. I think he's talking Tuesday, Heupel is. So I suppose there's a chance he could come out and say it on Tuesday. So
no way.
wet blanket of hand over
I
there.
think it's more likely that it happens Tuesday than it happens the day of the game or the day before the game.
Well, we were some of us media types were talking on campus waiting for, or maybe I think we were waiting on Mike Matthews, but when it was Milton 4 years ago, it was game week Monday, but that was a Thursday opener. They were also playing Bowling Green. And so did it really matter? I mean, so no offense to the Falcons, but you're playing Syracuse, who's much more of a formidable opponent. I don't know what Tennessee fans' view of Syracuse is. They probably think they went to the games last year, but everybody left, so they're not going to be any good. But they also have a quarterback competition too. So, and if they're not naming anybody, I can see Josh Heupel saying, as Ryan sort of alluded to, if they're not naming anybody, I'm not naming anybody. But I can also see that if it's so obvious, just it might be better for the quarterbacks themselves. I mean, Heupel is, a former quarterback. He's a former quarterbacks coach. He's been part of these situations before. He knows that you've got to sort of handle them. I don't say delicately, but I understand why they, even though it has been pretty obvious now, why they have continued to sort of foster and try to kind of let it play out organically. There's been, there's a reason for them to do that. So there also is a reason for them to gamesmanship and not, make Syracuse spend as much time or as little time as they want on Merklinger, or there's the flip side of, hey, let's just, Joey's our guy. Let's announce it to the world and we're going to go with it and roll with it. So I don't think it'll be Tuesday. I also don't think it'll be like, college game day before kickoff of that game either. I think it could be game week. But I do think, Aguilar has, and Heupel talked about him after the scrimmage saying that he's done a good job of progressing through camp. I do think he's done a good job. I think he's done what he's needed to do. Solid is the word I kind of continue to hear with Aguilar. I think he's been solid and done what he's needed to do to, like I said, take advantage of that job. But to Ryan's point, it is hard to sort of assess how he's played because he hasn't had his top guys out there. So I do think Staley got back into some individual work late last week, as did Brazel. But obviously they've got to ramp it up pretty quickly here over the next couple of weeks. I think Staley sounds to be a little bit closer to being ready to play in a game than Brazel. But they've still got a couple of weeks to sort of get those guys right. And that's why they're going to need, we'll see who the backup slot is, or if they just play a lot of 12 personnel with the extra tight ends, or maybe 13 personnel. They've got some good tight ends, but they certainly are going to need maybe Travis Smith and Rodarius Jackson. There's been good reviews on them back in the spring throughout camp as well, I think, too. So those guys can, maybe get a bigger role to help Brazel sort of ease back into things as they get into the opener.
Patrick, what was your biggest non-quarterback takeaway from what we've gathered and heard from the scrimmage?
I'll kind of go with two. I think this freshman class might make a little bit more of an impact than maybe I thought. And you hear some freshmen that are kind of maybe not going to start, but I think have had good showings and have sort of shown the staff that, hey, they can contribute. We all know about David Sanders. I mentioned Smith and Jackson. I think those guys have continued on the plane, the trajectory that they've needed to. I mean, you hear about DeJuan Morris. How much is he going to play? But, he had, I think, a nice scrimmage. The tight ends, Jack Van Dorselaer and Desan Brame, I think Tennessee could conceivably play both of them. I mean, Brame is done a good job. I mean, Heupel said he's going to play a big part for us, but I think Van Dorselaer didn't go in the first scrimmage. But I think he, that's been a good back and forth between those two guys all offseason, really, because Van Dorselaer comes in, has a good spring. Brame kicks it into gear when he sees the other freshmen ahead of him. Brame comes on strong, does a good job in the first scrimmage. Van Dorselaer wasn't out there. He comes back this week and sort of shows that he can continue, he can contribute as well. Ethan Utley, I think, has had a good camp on the defensive line. And that's where, and I'll throw in Ty Redmond too. I think he's a guy that's going to, be able to help them at corner early in the season when Jermon McCoy is still sort of working his way back. And I'll tie Utley into my second takeaway, which is the David Hobbs injury, which one I think is really unfortunate for him because I think he was, I think, Rodney Garner talked really high about him a couple weeks ago, just about how much talent he has. He's talked about that before. He's made the Richard Seymour comparison before. And even on the first couple of days of practice, you walk out there and you're like, who's this guy, number 5? He looks like he's ready to tear it up. So, Rodney talks about what would this guy look like had he not had 2 shoulder surgeries? Now he's got this injury, which not going to keep him out for most of the season, doesn't sound like, Ryan, but might miss a few games early in the season. Tough break for him, but now it casts that back into that rotation at defensive tackle that they were looking for guys to sort of step up there, be the fourth, fifth guy. Now those guys are going to have to be third and fourth. And I think Ethan Utley has done a good job there. Jamal Wallace is a guy who was, from what I was told in the spring, was going to be a long way away from being a factor this fall, but seems like he's going to be a factor this fall. So those two kind of things sort of stand out to me as you hear, and I thought this freshman class would have some contributors. Obviously Sanders is the one that gets everybody's attention, but it sounds like there's a lot of talent in this freshman class, and it'll be interesting to me again. And I got to point this out because we've heard this how many times this offseason. Young guys don't have time to be young. And when Heupel has said that, he's also kind of talked about the coaching staff in that regard too. And I think he's touching on, you got to play these guys. So I want to see how willing they're going to, are they going to throw Ty Redmond early in a series against Syracuse? If he's the third corner in that game, are they going to, they're going to let DeJuan Morris handle kickoff returns and punt returns if he's not in the backfield? How early are they going to play these guys? So that's a question I have coming out of camp, but it does sound like this freshman class maybe has some more guys that are ready to play and that was something that you kind of heard coming out of the scrimmage as well.
Marion Dye, another young guy I would throw in there, that's going to be in the back end of the rotation at strong side defensive end. I think he's shown enough to be kind of that fourth guy behind Tyree Weathersby and Tyree West. So that's a good situation that many freshmen already have made an impact. I think that's a very good sign. And Utley in particular, he's one that's probably been more of a factor at defensive tackle than people might realize. So I think he's going to play a lot of football for them this year, especially given the Hobbs injury. I think you're definitely right to point to the Hobbs injury. I think that's a pretty big deal. It's not ideal. It's better to happen now than during the season, of course, because now you can knock out a couple weeks of this recovery before any games are played. But it's going to extend into the season. It's just a matter of how long. From how it's been described to me, it sounds like he's likely to miss at least a couple games, and then beyond that, we'll see. But no specific timeline on that one yet. But it's definitely something that is going to, I think, extend it, past the season opener, and we'll see beyond that. Not ideal because I think he was the guy on this team, and I already have questions about the pass rush on this team. I think that's kind of quietly maybe a mild concern of mine. I'm not ready to sound the alarm or anything, but the Leo position has some somewhat unproven guys, and Joshua Joseph has played a lot of football, but can he be a 7 or 8 sack type of edge rusher? He's not had big sack totals to this point. Can Caleb Herring take a big step forward? They're high on him internally, but how much can he live up to what they think he can be? And can Jordan Ross take a step? Because it feels to me like he's shown he can be maybe a part-time player on some level, but is he going to be a really good pass rusher for this team? So they could use some help from some interior pass rushers. And without Omar Norman-Lott, I thought David Hobbs was the guy maybe most likely among that group to give you that type of sack production. So it's a setback for him. Not ideal to start the season banged up, but again, better to happen during camp than in the middle of the season and endanger his availability for one of your marquee games or more than one potentially. So that's definitely one of the bigger developments. Some of the names I keep hearing that aren't going away. Desan Brame keeps making plays in the passing game. I think Patrick's right to point to Jack Van Dorselaer as a guy that's going to be a big factor too. But Brame is a guy who's definitely flashed in camp and shown he can help this team. My question is, can they get him ready for an every down type of role? Because he's put on some good weight this year, but I don't know that he's developed enough as a blocker for them to throw him out there and run tempo and not be able to substitute the way Tennessee does. So what will they do there to get him on the field? It might take some creativity, but it seems like he's a guy that can help you enough in the passing game. You've got to get him out there at some point. And then I think they've had some guys that have looked good on the defensive side of the ball that have been thrown into some bigger roles. I think Idris Farouk has had a nice camp, has shown up well at the safety position, kind of locking down that starting job. And it sounds like a pretty good day overall for the defense, even though there were some guys out. So I think there's a lot to like about this team. And let's not overlook the consistent storyline that's been out there. Offensive line, not bad at all. Again, I didn't hear that they dominated, but it sounds like that group has been pretty good. And they've been mostly healthy, but Jesse Perry looks good at right guard. Sounds like Sam Pendleton's going to win the job for the starting center position. So that offensive line still has some question marks maybe, but I think it's looked better than we thought it might going into preseason camp.
That was the storyline that I was going to add to our scrimmage number 2 takeaways is that it seems as if Sam Pendleton has taken over the center job. And since Ryan stole my thunder, Patrick, I'll let you discuss Sam Pendleton and William Satterwhite.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's been trending towards Pendleton. I don't know about a time frame. I think maybe going in or coming out of the first scrimmage, it sounds like it's been trending that way. But I do think both those guys again did get first team work in the scrimmage. I think it was more Pendleton for most of it, and then Satterwhite maybe later on. But I mean, to the point of the offensive line, earlier in a practice last week, we saw them both in the lineup because I think David Sanders was limited, so they kicked Jesse Perry out to right tackle, and Pendleton over to right guard. Satterwhite came in, so I do wonder. Is Satterwhite the sixth guy? They've got some moving pieces on that offensive line, but Ryan talked about the continuity with the receivers and the passing game that they need to sort of settle in. And I think they could do the same on the offensive line too. If Pendleton's your guy, then I think you've got your 5, with it being Hurd, Moy, Pendleton, Perry, and Sanders. And now if that's your 5, after doing a lot of mixing and matching and all that stuff over the couple 2 weeks of camp that Glenn Ellerby and the staff were doing, I think now you can sort of settle in on who that 5 is. I do, like I said, there's moving pieces on the interior. Would Satterwhite be the 6th guy? If Lance Hurd went out, they'd kick Sanders over left tackle, Perry be the right tackle. Would Sham Umarov come in and play left guard over, and they kick Moy over? Who's that 6th guy? I think is still a question on that offensive line, but and how much deeper they go beyond that. But to Ryan's point, I do think Pendleton's sort of emerging there. I think you've got your starting 5 on that offensive line, and even Heupel said it after the scrimmage. He thinks they collectively could be pretty good this year. So they still have to go out and prove it, obviously. And we're at that point of the preseason where it's like, okay, we've heard this guy might be good, but now they've got to go actually out and do it. And so much can change, right? That first game, some guy turns an ankle, hurts a shoulder on the first play, and those coaches are working into the contingency plans that they've sort of been working on all preseason.
Ryan, heading into mock game week, I guess this is week 4 of camp, if we wanted to call it that, but now shifting, it's not week 4?
No, camp is over. They start school on Monday, so you're not in camp mode when you're in school.
Well, Josh Heupel was asked that exact question, and he said, no, we're still going to have camp-like practices. So when he stops referring to camp-like practices, I will stop referring to it as fall camp. So as Tennessee has a bit of camp on schedule this week and a bit of mock game week on schedule this week, what do you think is of the utmost importance? I feel like these are pretty easy answers and not anything that we haven't really discussed. I mean, obviously, I think priority number 1 is the passing game continuing to come along with getting receivers back in the lineup. Joey Aguilar settling in more and more as the backup, or as the starting quarterback. My mind was working a little too fast for my mouth. I was going to add that maybe one thing we do need to discuss before we get out of here is that George McIntyre did not have as strong of a second scrimmage as he did the first scrimmage, it sounds like, and I still do think it's more of a conversation about who's the backup quarterback than who is the starting quarterback. So the passing game needing to continue to come along and start to find the rhythm, because it's that time. Like you got to find a way to get going at this point. But just for the sake of answering something different of what needs to be accomplished this week, of course, there's 1,000 things, but with some of these nicks and knacks on the defensive side of the ball, as you discussed, I think you need to come up with some plans and start to feel good about a couple of different things because of injuries on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I think all that's definitely worth mentioning. I didn't hear that George McIntyre didn't have a good day, but he did have a pass that was nearly taken back for a touchdown by Boo Carter, who was working with the number 3 defense. So that's obviously not ideal. I think he's still showing flashes, but I did think it was very noteworthy that Josh Heupel in his post scrimmage comments referred to both of them in discussing the quarterbacks, clearly referring to Joey Aguilar and Jake Merklinger, and then said, and George. And I think letting everyone know, no, George McIntyre is not part of the decision-making process when it comes to picking a starting quarterback. So I think that is a very intentional move on Tennessee's part. I think this week they kind of did some things on the field, even to start to pare things down and start to narrow their focus in the quarterback race. And I think those comments kind of underscored that there's no controversy. There's not going to be Joey Aguilar, versus a talented freshman. It is Joey Aguilar versus Jake Merklinger for the starting job. And I think it sounded like a slip to people, but I think it was probably not, if I had to be honest, about what Josh Heupel said there. He doesn't say much by accident. So that's noteworthy. But yeah, for this week, I definitely think passing game is number one. And then, like you said, getting some guys back out there on defense. You want to be at full strength as much as possible. It sounds like there's been a little bit of illness maybe that's gone around. You want to get that flushed out, obviously, before game week. So things like that, and guys are starting class. This is kind of where you start to complicate the game week preparation process. You got to adjust to students having everyone back on campus and things like that. They're going to go and hang out with their friends and all those things. They've got to deal with distractions well. But yeah, it's kind of getting ready for a game now and turning your attention to Syracuse a little more and starting to try to get some continuity. But that's the biggest thing for me: get those receivers back on the field and try to get some chemistry going between Joey Aguilar and these wide receivers he's going to be throwing to, because he hasn't had them out there in scrimmages.
I'll add on top of the receivers and everybody, used to be the start of class such a big deal, but almost all these freshmen were here in the spring. So they've been on this campus through a full semester when it's, I guess been pretty lively. So I'd start there. I'd throw in defensive tackle too. I think that's a situation where you still want to see who your new, maybe even 5 and 6 are, because that's another position where it's easy for someone to bang up a shoulder, and now you're even deeper into your depth chart there. So running guard, I'll keep those guys, I'm sure, pretty going at a pretty hard rate to sort of keep that going. I do think it's interesting how Tennessee is handling this, because, I mean, if you equate this situation to an NFL team, it would be like Aguilar's like the veteran guy you brought in as, maybe a free agent. Then you'd have 2 young quarterbacks. McIntyre, you'd probably equate to like a first round pick. Merklinger is probably a day 3, 4th round, 5th round guy. I feel like most NFL teams would say, okay, our 2 guys are the veteran and then the first round pick that we just got. And then they're getting, I guess, the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft with Faison Brandon coming in. So it's such an interesting, such an interesting dynamic. And like I said earlier, Heupel has been through these, so he knows that that's a position you got to handle it. I don't know if delicately is the word, but it's a position you've got to be more cognizant of how you're sort of handling all of it. So I do think that's an interesting sort of setup, because, if you were NFL-izing it, which college football is becoming more, I guess, like the NFL. Apparently, we're going to have like a 2018 playoff here before too long if the Big Ten has its way, which it shouldn't. But, I mean, it's an interesting kind of setup there. And certainly I think if they had to go to either of those 2 guys, I think the nature of how that would transpire would be, would sort of impact maybe how they would go about it. But those things that they've got to focus on. I mean, Heupel made it clear after the scrimmage, we're winding it down and getting closer to this and that, but they've still got stuff to do, and the urgency should even kick in more now that as you get even now within 2 weeks of the game. But this game week they like to do to make sure that it's not foreign to the team and everybody sort of gets into those routines. I think Heupel's very routine driven, so if you can start it a week earlier, it makes it easier once it's there for real.
Ryan, what is the latest on Savion Hyder watch? And Patrick, what can folks find with a trip over to GoVols247 this weekend?
Yeah, Savion Hyder, that's he's announcing Tuesday. That one, not a whole lot different from what we said recently, because he is so quiet. I think this is one of those announcements that would not shock me if neither Michigan nor Tennessee, the 2 obvious front runners in this one, ends up getting the final answer from Savion Hyder before he actually announces his decision. It's one of those where he and his family have kept things pretty close to the vest, and kind of have a lot of people guessing. If you're just reading the tea leaves, I've mentioned this on the checkerboard on GoVols247. There are probably more reasons on the surface to lean slightly toward Michigan being the favorite, but I just knowing what I know about how this is all transpired, I think Tennessee's done a great job with Savion Hyder, and it wouldn't shock me if it went either way. So I still think Tennessee has a shot. It's definitely an announcement worth watching Tuesday. But yeah, if you had to put odds on this, you'd probably say Michigan's still the favorite. It's just, I think either team's capable of winning that one. And then, Darius Gray also announcing on Friday don't have any reason right now to think that one is likely to be Tennessee, but I've also had some people tell me that one's, still been up in the air to some degree. So we'll see if we hear anything this week that suggests Tennessee's maybe more of a factor in that one down the stretch. But most people kind of thought South Carolina and LSU were the more likely, more likely to be the choice, one of those two, as opposed to Tennessee. But I think Tennessee is still in it and certainly talking to him a lot.
Ben, you wanted me to pitch what's coming. Monday is depth chart day on GoVols247. We will presumably get one from Tennessee next week. But
ours has no oars, right? Is that a commitment to no oars?
That is, no, not a single one. There will be some written, but there will not be any on the actual depth chart. We will try to say, here's what we expect it to look like. It's basically, this is sort of here's what we think it's actually going to look like versus all the, last year when the entire depth chart was everybody was oared. But that depth chart, to be fair, I mean, they've rotated a lot, and everybody that played in the rotation, particularly on defense, was on there. So, it's not, you can take the Tennessee one with somewhat of a grain of salt, but this one we try to say, hey, this is what it's going to look like at least to start the season. That'll be Monday. Probably highlight some guys whose stock is up this preseason as well. And then I think I might rank some position groups. What position groups should Tennessee feel the strongest about? Which ones are the maybe not so strong about us? So those will be 3 things to look for Sunday into Monday. And then we will be back on campus on Tuesday for some media availability. I think we'll hear from Josh Heupel, right? Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe players on Wednesday. Ben doesn't know. Ben just shrugged.
For Ryan Callahan and Patrick Brown, I am Ben McKee. This has been another edition of the GoVols247 Podcast.